Hello, and welcome to the Race, Wealth, and Health Podcast, a podcast that serves to educate and empower while we explore the intersections of social justice, economic empowerment, and holistic well-being within communities of color. I am your host, Dr. Joycelyn Morris, and I invite you to join me as we dive deep into the crucial topics that shape our lives, challenge the status quo, and strive for a more equitable future for all. Welcome back to part 2 of the conversation with Dr. Watkins on Shame to Freedom, Steps to Financial Well-Being. We left off last week asking how people of color can change the narrative and have more open and honest money conversations. Let's see what Dr. Watkins has to say.
So, one, I want to acknowledge white people have had, a couple centuries head start in terms of building wealth. Because remember with that wealth transfer piece, somebody is realizing, I'm going to spend a whole bunch of money to a subsequent generation. I want them to squander my money, So we have to have those conversations. Not everybody survived it in terms of, the Vanderbilts. That wealth was gone, I think, within 2 generations. But the Rockefellers, on the other hand, their fund still exists. And so that largely was the result of, one, John Rockefeller did his estate planning. He did not leave the business to any particular person, but instead there is a trust that owns the business. And then all the heirs, you go through the trust. So that was smart. But one of the things that's really cool about them too is that they have an annual meeting. Once everyone gets to like the age of 21 who's in that family, they have an annual meeting where all they do is talk about their philanthropic efforts and also personal finances as well. So it's like this whole, right, it is so cool. You've got this built-in system of doing these things, but also they have significant wealth. So that's one of the reasons why I think these conversations definitely come up more so in white families, is because they have more access to wealth and these resources that have to be managed a lot more closely than maybe some of the things that we have. But in terms of how to really start it, it's definitely one, I'm a big proponent for K through 12 education when it comes to personal finance. Yep. And so there are a lot of parents who really feel like, children shouldn't be learning about money. Like that's an adult thing. Just let them deal with those problems later. But what they don't know is children as young as 3 years old are learning about money, whether you're talking about it or not, because they're watching you. And if they see that you're stressed out over money then becomes this thing that maybe they should avoid, because all it does is just causes stress and, heartache of some sort. So people need to, one, understand that, like, whether you're talking about it or not, children are learning. So I think it really does need to be built into our public education system, as well as community groups that we're a part of. So whether it's your professional organizations, social organizations, whatever the case may be, make it a part of your objectives for the org too, to have personal finance, financial literacy, whatever you want to call it, to be a part of like your well-being efforts as well, because that really is a big component to it. So then if we're able to talk about it within those more tight-knit social circles as well, those are safer spaces, at least I would hope so, where now that conversation starts to grow and expand. So that's one way. I think even in college level, for those who do attend, and it doesn't have to just be a traditional four-year institution, I'm talking about any institution that people attend post-high school, to also make it a requirement as well too, to talk about those things. And a lot of states are passing mandates to have like a financial literacy course at the high school level. But at that point, so much has to be undone in terms of the learning that they've already gained, whether it's from explicit socialization to your parents sitting you down and teaching you about money, or implicit, you're just observing and learning how to deal with it. But it's not something that's like a one and done approach. It's something that's constantly growing on. So we're starting from like the basics in kindergarten, a little piggy bank and budgeting and stuff like that. And then we grow into investments and the more complex estate planning type stuff. But along the way, all we're doing is building upon the things that we already learned. So we're reinforcing that knowledge so that it's continue to be used, and you see how it's all connected. And so that really can happen in many different aspects of our lives. But we do know that K through 12 is something all of us are going to go through. And if it could at least start there, that would be great. And then also, I've seen a lot of companies where people get financial education through their employers,
Mhm.
that's starting to really take off a lot more, especially as people who are planners and counselors are targeting employers to do work specifically for them. So that would be great if more employers were incentivized to make sure that they held workshops. And I don't want to say mandatory, but oftentimes they're optional, and they need to at least permit people to have time to go to them,
Yeah.
or be like, all right, this is part of your work for the day, you know? So, but that is the big way to infuse it. But it's not just going to be, we've got this one curriculum and we're going to implement that. It has to be one that incorporates individuals' culture into it as well. And so I was reading this article by Chloe McKenzie, and basically she was talking about financial literacy is not going to overcome oppression. And she did an interview very similar to your dissertation with 100 participants and asking them why they didn't think financial literacy efforts would work. The vast majority, and these are young individuals that she spoke with, I think they're 25 and younger, all of them were like, how is this going to help me deal with racism?
Mhm.
How is this going to help me deal with the day to day microaggressions, all the isms that we have to deal with? If you have a program and it doesn't even account for any of that, then that's not the program for that group.
Yeah.
Whatever is created, it has to be something that's culturally responsive and flexible to fit the needs of the audience. And it can't be cookie cutter whatsoever, because, all right, you tell me to save, but I don't have the extra money to save. So what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
You know? So I think those are the big parts. And then also, one of the things I love about our group is we're pretty open now about what people make, what y'all are doing. I brag on y'all all the time. I'm like, yeah, my friends just told me Google's got that stock split coming. Like, get ready for it. So normalizing that. We sit around and we talk about all kinds of things, the drama in our relationships, the drama at the job, what's going on with the kids and the husband. Well, let's talk about the money. Right? Let's make that just as normal of a conversation to have as anything else. And I really love this for social media in terms of breaking that barrier as well, because I call millennials the truth tellers. Like, in terms of breaking through all those just stupid normatives that we were supposed to follow, that people are like, yeah, that's not it. That's not it at all. And it can definitely be that vehicle to help normalize these feelings that people have and allow them to be vulnerable and open.
Yeah.
And even if they don't want to talk with close friends and family, well, here are the people you can talk to. So you can go to an accredited financial counselor, or you can go to a certified financial planner. And there are different types of those as well. So maybe we can find someone who's free or works within whatever your income range is as well. People also need to know that they do have the resources. And a lot of times when you're at that stage, you think you're alone in this, and you're the mistake. Not that you made a mistake, you're what's wrong. If you're in that mindset, the likelihood of actually looking for someone, but you're not talking to anyone who can let you know that you're not the mistake, those chances really go down. So it's really just got to be these open conversations where, I'll tell all my business on this one if it just makes anyone feel okay to be like, hey, can you talk to me about this? I'm like, yes, I'm on it. Let's do this. So
Well,
normalizing it. Yeah.
speaking of telling all your business, because that sounded appropriate. One of the things I wanted to get into, again, going back to financial shame, I
Hmm.
don't want to negate that a lot of that is psychological,
Hmm.
behavioral,
Yeah.
right? You mentioned an example, like if you saw your parents or parent struggling with money, then 9 times out of 10, you automatically associate that with money. If you saw them maybe not sharing certain things with people,
Yeah.
you associate those same types of behaviors. And so when you realize that you had the void of not having access
Mhm,
for luxuries and therefore you were heavy on the treat yourself,
mhm.
right?
Tre
When
Yeah,
it's
treated
money gotta
myself
go.
all the way to zero in my retirement account.
How did you unpack that though? Like honestly, how did you unpack
Mhm,
that and how did you change that behavior? Because I do think with a lot of financial shame is a reflection of
mhm.
behaviors, where those came from,
Yeah.
identifying that, and then making those conscious steps towards doing something different. So tell me, how did you identify that and what steps did you take to shift that mentality for yourself?
That's a really good question. Dan and I set out on our quest in terms of our personal finances, I think 2012, and then really hit the ground running 2013. Honestly, I don't know if I was able to reflect on it while we were married in that fourth year, right? Or if it took me until I became a parent myself, which is what, that's 2013. When that happened, my guess is that as I was learning how to parent, and so I know a lot of people are like, you can't learn from a book. You can learn a lot from a book. But let me tell you what you can't learn from. Not getting anything at all. So pick up the book. It's okay. But one of the things we were adamant talking about is what were some of the values we wanted to instill in our children, and things that we knew that we should be doing for them. So we knew, money was an issue for us. So we were like, well, we definitely got to be on it for them. And that is really how I stumbled into financial socialization, was that I started reading the parenting literature and just socialization in general. And now we've got this personal finance component to it as well. So that is how I recognized that that was an issue. In terms of the steps going forward, I really do feel sometimes that was divine intervention that hit me that day when I got to that door on the 27th floor and was just like, no more. But I had matured to a point where maybe I didn't take 100% of the faults of the things that I was doing, but I was able to take some, right? And so it was a little opening. And as a result, I was able to open that door more and more, start engaging in more reflection. And then we learned how to better communicate with each other too. That is a big piece in all relationships, whether it's your friendships or your significant others. Communication skills is a must, and we're not taught that either. So even if we didn't know anything about money, we were able to communicate how we felt or how our actions impacted the other person. And then that gave us, okay, so this is a problem. This is how it's affecting you. What solution are we going to come up with to try and fix this thing? Because it can't just be like this. We're not going to sit in this mess. We got to clean it up. And so then together we were able to work to come up with a solution. And even if you don't have a significant other where you're having to work through this, it's really that, all right, is there an opening where you like, okay, something's going on here. Maybe you think it's just a mistake or you're the mistake, whatever the case may be. And then if you feel like, there's something that's there that needs to be explored, baby step your way to it. So maybe you're not going into like a full on counseling session with someone about your finances, because I tell my students all the time, people are getting financially naked with you. And some of us got banging bodies and we'll show it all today and whatnot. But for the most part, being naked in front of people is just very frightful for us. So if it's feeling like that, have a casual conversation with someone who you tend to find to be empathetic. I would also preface the conversation with, I want to talk about something, but I really don't need you to judge me right now. Are you able to do that for me? And then see where it goes. And if they're not your person, okay, fine. But just don't give up. You're taking those baby steps to find out who are the people you can talk to, who can then connect you with the resources as well. Or you can just skip people entirely and go to an organization like a financial planning firm, or depending on your situation, you may want to start with a counselor if you need the basics. So you go to afcp.org. What people know that? Not necessarily, but now you know. And you find like an AFC in your area, and you don't have to
AFC.
put it an accredited financial counselor. And so CFP, certified financial planner. And I encourage individuals to only go to one of those two, because they're fiduciaries, which means that they have to put their clients' interests above their own. And when they don't, that makes them liable for lawsuits. So they have the incentive to make sure that you're doing good, because it helps them to do well. So you have your initial consultation and you just let it be known, I just need to go at this slowly. This is what's going on. And those early conversations really is about getting to know the person, their situation, and not making you have to deal with things head on. But instead, we're slowly building a relationship where you get to trust me and share those things with me. And then I can then share with you some of the things that may help you to start improving your financial situation. But that's going to be more difficult, of course, for someone who has a neurodivergency. So if you have some kind of mental illness where you pop in the Zoloft and the Wellbutrin every day to make sure that you can stay even, you don't necessarily respond to everything in the same manner. And that's okay. It's just that when you have those moments where things are a little better for you to start letting someone come in and do the baby steps, that's when you can initiate. And then that person will work with you during those better days. And then there are things that can be put in place to kind of automate stuff. So you don't have to always think about it too. So those are the steps that I took. Those are steps I think other people can take, but they just first need to know that they're not alone in this.
Yeah.
So if they're listening to this podcast, you're not alone. And this, it is very normal to not have your financial life together. Unfortunately, you are the outlier when you talked about, your dad teaching you about like reading the stock session and all the money that you would save and everything. And I was like, why did I get that? That's not a norm. But unfortunately, like how you thought everybody got that, most people think that other people did get it too.
Right.
And they didn't. So,
No,
but yeah.
And you mentioned a little earlier about financial well-being. You and I both know that that's the goal, but what is financial well-being and how should people be thinking about their finances and their
Mhm.
practices when it comes to financial well-being?
Yeah, there are quite a few definitions for financial well being, but the most simple version of it is that someone can meet their short term, intermediate, and long term financial goals.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, you have peace with this. Your podcast rightly has the wealth and the health component of it. So your stressors can be financially related, which then turns into health related
Yep.
issues. And it could go the other way around, right? So a health issue popped up,
Mhm.
drained your financial resources potentially, and that stress is still there no matter what direction it went into. So when we talk about financial well-being, we're talking about people having resources or access to resources to be able to do the things that you want to do for leisure and fun because that brings you joy, that brings you peace in your spirit, or to be able to handle the emergencies when they come up too. So you're not stressed out about where am I going to get that money? Well, you've been doing all the things that you can do, whether it's been increasing your savings accounts, you put that money on that HSA card, don't forget about it, or you have access to people within your network. Because I think we don't talk enough about that social capital piece and how invaluable it is. Just knowing somebody to connect you to somebody could be all the world of a difference. And so when you have those resources put in place, or as you're building those resources, you should start to feel your stress levels that's related to finances come down. Your anxiety may come down. Now, at first, they may be elevated because as you're learning things, you're starting to realize like how little you do know, right? And that can stress you out. But the thing is, take your time with it. You're going to do the things that you need to do. And hopefully you get to see like all those great, wonderful outcomes as a result of that work. You get to reap those benefits then. So it's really about a person's overall well being is a component of that. When your finances are good, you're doing good.
Yeah.
When you can handle those unexpected expenses, you don't get stressed out because you did what you needed to do back when. So,
And something you said there when you were defining financial well-being, which I might butcher a little bit, but
mhm,
it's the ability to meet both your short-term, and your
mhm,
long-term goals, and in such a way that allows you to have peace and not be
yeah,
stressed about it. I say that because going back to your earlier example of the person who say has $2,000 in their bank account and
mhm,
thinks that not enough. What I heard when you said that, and I want our listeners to really catch it, is that there's no dollar amount attached to
yeah,
financial well-being, right? It literally will vary person to person based
mhm,
on your lifestyle, your living, and your desires. And I think that's
yeah,
important to note. I think social media is a blessing and a curse, right? In terms of
mhm,
there's a lot
right,
of
yeah.
information out now, but there's also a lot of
I got misinformation.
right, but there's
Just
also a lot
bad
of
information.
doing
Yeah,
it for the likes, right? Too many
yeah.
people purporting and pushing out
Mhm.
these lifestyles and are in extreme debt to support these lifestyles, so on and so forth. And so there's an easy ability to think that you're not where you need to be. And so
Yeah.
it's a different conversation. Certainly there's a level of contentment that needs to be there. And that honestly might require some self-work, reflection, maybe even working with a professional to get
Yeah.
there, right? To understand
Mhm.
these are your goals. Your goals don't have to look like somebody else's.
Exactly.
What you need, what I need to prepare for my short-term and long-term goals are very different than what even you need, right? Because you have two
Exactly.
kids and a husband. I have a dog. So my needs would look very different than yours and
Yeah.
vice versa. And so I think it's important to note that for people, that there is no one size fits all. It's not, oh, once you're making that six-figure salary, or oh, once you have X amount of $1,000 in savings, then you're
Right.
great and you're good to go. Which is why, as you mentioned earlier, it's probably very helpful for people to also working with a counselor who can help them look
Yeah.
at their particular situation, what their goals are, and figure that out. One of the things I love, she's called the Budgetnista, Tiffany Aliche.
Yeah.
I love her. Said about budgeting, and I say this all the time: use your budget to look for your yes, right? Versus
Mhm.
looking for your no. And so part of it is, what is your current lifestyle, but also what do you want your lifestyle to be, right?
Right.
Is your current financial situation not afford you to do some of the things that you may want to do? Obviously, folks see travel pictures behind me. So if traveling is something that you want to do and something that you love, that's
Yeah.
something you want to budget for. That's a part of your goal, whether it's short or long
Mhm.
term, and being able to create a plan to
Yeah.
get there. And it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, how long did it take you and Dan to get to a point where you guys felt comfortable and in a place of financial well-being?
So at the time, we didn't have any kids. So we were dinks, the dual income, no kids types. And our student loan debt was accelerated because I was a Fed. So I was eligible for the student loan forgiveness program. And so, well, actually, not necessarily a student loan forgiveness program, but instead, each agency can give a certain stipend amount up to $10,000. At least that's how it was back in 2013, to help put towards your student loan debt. And you just had to give your commitment of 3 years to your agency when you got that. So we got a big push in my ability to receive that a couple times, but it took us, with that included, probably 8 months to fully got a debt, because then it really wasn't that much debt, but we just weren't managing it. I know we did it in under a year, but we were also very intentional about getting it done fast. So that meant a lot of the things that we would normally do, we wouldn't do. We just had to go like, all right, it's not as important as getting out of debt, or it's not as important as paying off this credit card. Like, how am I going to feel when I do that thing? So we had to do that a lot.
So what were some of those sacrifices? Because again, I think listeners need to hear that. Wellness,
So
and I think about it even in physical well, like there are certain sacrifices I cannot eat. I used to
yeah,
eat and then be able to
yeah.
get. So talk about, what are some of those things that you had to give up?
Well, the very first sacrifice was this, and it was so small, but it shaped everything. We went into Harris Teeter, and this is like January, so all the Christmas
Harris
stuff
Teeter
is
is
like,
like the Publix
oh my, yes,
people in
of
different
like the
regions. People in
DMV,
different regions.
right? No, okay. We went to the grocery store.
The nice grocery store people, the nice grocery store.
And so it's January, so all the Christmas stuff has been discounted, and it's just sitting in a cart up front. And I saw these beautiful ornaments that were just $1 each. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna get me some ornaments. And Dan looked at me, he was like, is that in the budget? I was like, what you talking about? Like, it's just $1 each. He was like, but is it in the budget? And I was like, no, it's no, we didn't plan for that when we came in here today. We planned for food. So I had to walk away. That was the thing. It was like, oh, I see it. I want it. I can get it. And even though it was just $1 each, clearly we could get it, but it wasn't a part of that plan. Other things that we didn't do as often was, we were in DC area, so you go out and you eat. And I love going to plays. I love traveling to different areas that were close by, get a little weekend, B&B or whatever. We just had to do fewer of those. It had to be a part of our plan versus like, Leah, let's just go do it. Also, we just started doing a lot more free stuff. That's what happened. And I mean, at least we were in a good area where you can find a lot of cool free stuff to do. But we had to reframe what entertainment looked like, what eating out look like? Like, what's wrong with going for a walk and just talking and doing that instead of having a 4 or 5 star restaurant sitting across from each other, eat your food and then leave? And it allowed for us to have more connection. And I even think people could just do that on their own so they can engage in introspection and become more connected with themselves. So it was having to be very intentional about, did this fit within our plan? Yes or no? It was a no. It was a hard pass. So I walked away from my little ornaments that day. But the cool thing was they were still there a couple months later. And at that point, we were able to budget ourselves a little blow it money. It wasn't that much. It may be about $50 a month or whatever. And at that point, it was 25 cents each.
See?
Right? I was like, okay, I see what's going on here. Like, this is the weight and the thing I get to reap from waiting. So it was really having that plan, like you said earlier, because we can come up with a plan for everything, but people will struggle with the finances because maybe they're like, well, I don't know how to do it. Nobody showed me how to do it, or you have to come face to face with it. But it was sticking to that plan. We had Mint as our budgeting app. And there are different types of budgeting apps out there. Nerd Wallet has a really good, extensive list of the types that are out there, and many of them are free. So we use Mint to keep track of our expenses. And we started automating things as well because we know that both of us are spenders. And once you know what your money personality looks like, then you can find out different ways to combat some of those behaviors that aren't the best. Both of us being spenders meant that we need to automate our savings first. So everything's just taken out. You don't think about it, goes into an account we don't even see.
Quick pause. Quick pause.
Uh-huh.
What I heard you say was pay yourself first. And
Yes.
make sure that as part of your budget, there is
Mhm.
money put aside to pay
Right.
yourself, i.e., savings, which you can use to invest or just general rainy day savings.
Yep.
But you automated that. So then that way it wasn't a question. And it sounded like put in your budget savings. And that's important because I think a lot of people forget to do that.
Yeah.
And it's important to start there, you know.
It really is. Because we're always paying ourselves what's left over at the end. Like, nah, Visa and MasterCard, what's the worst they can do to you? Versus those cards are maxed out and you don't have anything else to turn to in terms of your own personal savings.
Yep.
And you're more important. So,
I
yeah.
was going to say, paying yourself first is the real treat yourself way.
Right.
Like,
Exactly. It really is. Like, you get to put you first. You're not dependent upon anybody else to do that for you. You can do that for yourself. So we understood our money personalities better. I have a mix of spending and a little bit of a savings issue in terms of scarcity mindset. So whenever savings go below a certain number, then I start to feel that stress. But because we better understand our money attitudes, we kind of know how to deal with it. So the automation was big. Like even for retirement and for our savings.
Oh, absolutely. One, did you use a particular tool to determine your money behaviors and or are there tools and resources that our listeners could do to get a sense of what their behavior is around that so they can understand what they might need to do to make those?
So I would need to dig in to make sure that I can find those that are like more culturally responsive, but there is a site called Money Habitudes where you can, I think it might be like $5 or $10 where you can do this very extensive report that you'll get back on the different types of money habitudes. And the habitudes is just a combination of habits and attitudes about money. And they have different categories where they can identify that you're a person who spends because of status, or you're the person who has targeted goals. So you're the planner and that's your personality. And here's some of the things that you can do as a planner to enhance your situation. But also here are some things that might be a detriment to you as a planner. Because why would we look down on the planner? They put everything together. They're doing the dang thing, right? But they're the ones who are restricting themselves from being able to live now because they're so worried about not having enough money later. And I tell everybody, listen, you need to have that plan because if you think that you're going to travel in your 60s or your 70s after you retire, well, I hope you get that good knee surgery because like, right, if you've been anywhere in Europe, they don't have something like American Disabilities Act. And then on top of that, you're tired. I mean, unless you're just that person who's been keeping up with everything, like you just can't do the same thing as you get older. And then there's no guarantee in that either. That thing that you want to do will be there or you'll be there.
Yep.
So have that plan currently going on so that you can do it sooner than later. So Money Habits is really cool. I love the report that they put out. And when my students do it, most of them do feel that it's reflective of themselves. So, and I'll even do it from time to time as well, too, just to make sure, like, okay, this is where I am. Because you're a person, you grow, you can change. And that's perfectly fine.
As we sort of wrap up, what's maybe one quote that you live by or give to your clients or students when it comes to thinking about money?
Girl, I was like, just one. Well, one of the things I did want to say earlier, just to reiterate something you said, was personal finance. Focus on the personal part. That means this is something that is unique to you. Does not have to look like what everybody else is doing. This is a thing that helps you feel like you're progressing. You are gaining peace from doing this. Because the way that I spend and the way that you spend ain't the same type of spending, right? Like we may do some things here and there, see you in August for the concert, but right on the regular, we don't necessarily spend the same way. But that's okay, because I know that's what works for Joycelyn, and I got to do what works for me. Because it's hard, right, not to compare. But you remember, comparison is just the thief of joy. And so just having to remind yourself, focus on that personal part. And I tell all of my students still, focus on the personal part. There is no one solution for every single one of your clients because we're all different. So it's really about finding that thing that makes sense for you, even if it doesn't feel like it's the traditional way that everybody went. Is it working? Are you happy? That's the thing you need to do. So focus on the personal part of personal finance.
Love it. I think that probably was like my last quote, which was like, what do you want listeners to take away from today's conversation? But I think you nailed it. Focus on the personal part of personal finance and understand that your journey is just that. It's uniquely
Your journey. Yeah.
Based on everything, on your values, based on what you want to do, based on who you were purposed to be in this world and your individual impact. And so your finances would not be any different. They are going to be a reflection of who you are uniquely and individually. But Dr. Watkins and friend, this has been so amazing. I'm so glad I got a chance to catch up with you. And I know you gave our listeners a wealth of information. For those who may want to follow you or get any more information, how could they connect with you?
Oh, Lord, follow. That's the one thing I do have to work on. My email's very simple. Kimberly.Watkins@uga.edu. I'm also doing better about connecting on LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn too. Those are my primary ways that folks can reach me. Email's probably better though. I will say that. And I don't mind if like people just were like, hey, I heard such and such. I'll take the time out to help anybody. Yeah. I may not be able to be with you long term, but if I can get you going, I'm cool with that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Watkins. Appreciate you, friend. Love you. And yeah, let's just continue the work and getting this information out and having these conversations. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Well, that's all for today, folks. Enjoyed the show? Be sure to like and rate the podcast. You can find the Race, Wealth, and Health podcast on multiple platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. I also want to hear from you, so don't forget to connect with me on social media. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Race, Wealth, Health. By joining the online community, you'll stay updated on the latest episodes, behind the scenes insights, and engaging discussions. Share your thoughts, comments, and questions there. I appreciate your support in sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues who may also find value in these conversations. Thank you again for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care, stay informed, and keep up the good fight for equality.